They called her Juana la Loca, Juana the Mad, but madness like love is a story others tell when they don't want to understand. She was the daughter of Isabella the Catholic, the bride of a golden prince named Philip the Handsome, and the mother of Spain's future emperors. But in the dark corridors of her heart, grief grew like ivy on stone. When betrayal and death took everything she loved, she refused to let go, even when the body rotted, even when the church called it sin. Some say she buried her sons alive. Others say she buried her own soul first. And somewhere between love and madness, the crown began to whisper her name. It began like every fairy tale written by kings, with a marriage meant to save an empire. Juana of Castile was 20 when she left Spain, her mother's crucifix hidden beneath her gown. The ships that carried her to Flanders were heavy with gold, silk, and expectation. Every wave that struck the hull seemed to whisper the same word: duty. When she arrived in Brussels, the world opened into color, banners snapping in the wind, nobles bowing in jeweled armor, the air thick with incense and foreign tongues. At the center of it all stood Philip, the Handsome. And for once the poets were right. He had hair the color of summer wheat and eyes like the sky over Burgundy, sharp, blue, and far too sure of themselves. He bowed low before her, smiling not as a husband but as a conqueror. When their hands touched, the court gasped, as if the empire itself had just inhaled. The marriage was supposed to be political, but the first night burned that illusion away. The courtiers heard laughter, whispers, doors slamming, prayers turning into sighs. Spain had sent a princess. Flanders received a woman aflame. Juana fell into love like a fever, consuming, bright, impossible to hide. She followed Philip everywhere, to council, to hunts, even to the stables. When he smiled, she glowed. When he turned away, her heart broke like glass. But for Philip, love was only a mirror for his vanity. He liked the way she looked at him, like he was holy. Soon he began to test how far her devotion would stretch. He let courtesans linger too long. He flirted with duchesses. He kissed another woman's hand, knowing Juana watched. That night the palace trembled. Juana stormed through the corridors barefoot, her hair undone, calling his name. When she found the woman's chamber, she tore at the silks, at the pillows, at anything that carried his scent. The courtiers called it madness. Philip called it proof of love. He returned to her with sweet words and soft apologies. She forgave him, she always forgave him. And then he did it again. Each betrayal deepened the crack in her soul, and yet, when she prayed, she did not ask for peace. She asked that God never let her stop loving him. Months passed, and her first child was born, a son, Charles. The court celebrated. Spain rejoiced. Philip smiled for the painters. But Juana, holding her child beneath the flicker of candlelight, whispered to him, "Do not grow up like your father. Do not love what will destroy you." She looked at the baby's tiny hands, at the face that carried both their bloodlines, and felt the faint chill of prophecy, for the love that had begun as fire was already turning to ash, and ash, when buried deep enough, becomes something darker. In the golden palace of Flanders, the bride of Spain began to fade into something the poets could no longer describe. Not queen, not wife, not saint. Only a woman trying to hold on to the only man she ever believed could save her, even as he slowly became her curse. By the second year of their marriage, whispers about Juana had already begun. At court dinners, when she spoke too softly, they said she was brooding. When she laughed too loud, they said she was mad. When she stayed silent, they said she was plotting. It is always dangerous when a woman feels too deeply, especially when she is a queen. Philip had grown bored of love. He preferred admiration now. Courtiers bowing low, envoys praising his grace, women blushing at his smile. He began to see Juana's devotion not as devotion, but as weakness, and so he tested her again and again. One autumn night, he returned from a hunt reeking of perfume. When she demanded to know whose scent it was, he laughed. When she begged him to tell her, he called her hysterica. When she tried to leave, he barred the door. They say she spent that night praying before the crucifix until her knees bled. By dawn, she had forgiven him. But forgiveness, like blood, runs thinner each time it's spilled. The courtiers watched her with hungry eyes. They began to tell Philip that his wife was unstable, that she spoke to saints no one else could see, that she wept when no one had wronged her. It was easier to believe the queen was mad than to admit the king was cruel. Her letters to her mother, Queen Isabella, grew darker. "My husband has lost his soul," she wrote, "and I have lost mine in trying to find it." When her second child was born, a daughter, she named her Isabella, hoping the name would bring strength. Instead, it brought sorrow. Philip was nowhere to be found during the birth. He arrived days later, carrying another woman's ribbon in his coat. Juana, pale and weak, demanded to know whose it was. He smirked, kissed her forehead, and said, "Does it matter? You are my queen." That night she refused to eat. She sat by the cradle, rocking her child and whispering, "If he loves me, I am safe. If he stops, I will disappear." The servants began to fear her, not because she screamed, but because she was too quiet. She walked the corridors at night, barefoot, her hair loose, murmuring prayers for mercy. The guards bowed, but they never met her eyes. When the court chaplain asked her if she wished confession, she said, "There is no sin in loving too much." He told her, "Gently, Majesty, even love must obey God." She looked at him and said, "Then God should not have made me a woman." The next morning, Philip declared that the queen would no longer attend council. "She is unwell," he told the court. "She needs rest." But in the chambers above, Juana did not rest. She tore the embroidery from her sleeves. She burned letters. She prayed until her lips cracked. And when she finally slept, her dreams were of doors, always locked, and someone on the other side whispering her name. Each time she woke, she was certain it was Philip's voice. But the rooms were empty, and the only thing left was the echo. By the time winter came, the courtiers no longer asked, "Is she mad?" They began to ask, "How mad is she?" Death did not arrive with trumpets. It came quietly on the breath of autumn, the way rot creeps into a beam no one thinks to check. Philip had been traveling, court to court, hunt to hunt, collecting admiration the way other men collect debts. He loved the applause of foreign nobles, the wine of Burgundy, the eyes of other women. He did not love coming home to a wife who saw straight through him. Then, on a journey through Castile, he fell ill. At first, no one panicked. Princes caught fevers all the time. The doctors said it was nothing, a little bleeding, and prayer could not cure. They shaved his head, bled his arms, wrapped him in hot cloths that smelled of vinegar and rosemary. They told him to rest, but the fever did not leave. It deepened, like a debt coming due. Messengers rode through the night to reach Juana. The hooves struck sparks against the road. The word struck sparks against her soul. "The king is unwell. He calls for your highness. You must come." She rode without sleep. Her veil whipped behind her. Her hair came loose. The October wind cut her cheeks. But she did not slow. Love does not slow. Love arrives, even when love has been wounded 100 times. When she reached him, he was no longer the golden prince of their wedding night. The fever had hollowed him. His lips were dry, his eyes dull. Sweat clung to him like oil. The room reeked of sickness, sour, hot, human. Priests hovered like crows, doctors like flies. He looked at her, and in that moment every betrayal was burned away. He did not see the jealous queen. He did not see the woman who raged. He saw the only person on earth who had ever loved him without calculation. "Juana," he whispered, "not Majesty. Not Queen, not Infanta of Spain, just Juana." Her name, the way he had said it in the gardens long ago. She fell to her knees beside him. She took his hand. It was hot, shaking, fragile as old paper. "You will live," she said. She said it like a command, like a daughter of Isabella, like a woman who had never learned how to let go. But death is not a courtier. It does not bow to queens. The priests began to read the prayers for the dying. Candles were brought closer. One by one, the courtiers slipped out, so as not to be seen weeping. The doctor crossed himself. He knew. They all knew. Only Juana refused to know. She pressed her forehead to his hand. She begged, "Not to God, to him. Stay, I will forgive everything, all of it. Just stay." His eyes filled, not with tears, but with regret. He had hurt her more than any enemy could. Yet here she was, the only one fighting for him. He tried to speak again. His swollen tongue failed him. His chest rose once, twice, and then did not rise again. The room stilled. The priest closed Philip's eyes. A servant began to sob. Someone covered the mirror. Someone else whispered, "God has taken him." But Juana did not move. She kept holding his hand as though warmth could be summoned back by will. She kissed his fingers. She smoothed his hair the way wives do for sleeping husbands. She sat beside the bed until the candles burned low. When they came to take the body, she rose like a storm. "No," she said. They tried to reason with her. "Majesty, the body must be prepared." "No." "Majesty, it must be washed." "No." "Majesty, decay." I said no. There was something in her eyes that frightened even the soldiers. This was not a queen arguing with protocol. This was a woman fighting death itself. They dressed Philip in ceremonial robes, gold and white, the Habsburg cross upon his chest. They placed him in a coffin lined with silk. They brought roses to cover the smell. Juana stood over him, hands shaking. She had lost him so many times while he was alive, to his pride, to his lovers, to his ambition. She would not lose him now that he was finally still. "Close it," said the priest. "Open it," said the queen. From that moment, the legend began. Wherever the coffin went, Juana went. When it was placed in the chapel, she knelt beside it. When it was loaded onto a carriage to be taken to its burial place, she rode behind it, her veil torn by the wind, her eyes rimmed red. Villagers along the road stared, crossed themselves, whispered. "The queen follows the dead king," they said. "She will not let him leave. She is mad. She is bewitched. She is in love." Every town the procession passed, she gave the same order. "Open it." The guards hesitated. "Sovereign, it is not—" "Open it," and they did. She would look upon him, adjust his hair, wipe imagined dust from his cheek, whisper to him as though he yet breathed, "I am still here. They have not taken you. They will not take you." The churchmen were horrified. The body must rest. The body must be buried. This is not holy. But Juana did not care about holy. She cared about him, because in her mind to bury him was not to honor him. It was to abandon him. Her ladies tried to pull her away. Her confessors begged. Her mother from Spain wrote stern letters. But grief had eclipsed reason. She had found a way, finally, to keep Philip from other women. She would keep him in death. Thus began the tale whispered across Europe of the Spanish queen who rode with a corpse, who slept beside a coffin, who would not let the dead leave her sight. Some said she had the body exhumed to look at him. Some said she forbade any woman to come near the procession. Some said she sang to the coffin at night. What was true, what was rumor, no longer mattered, because power saw an opportunity. A queen who loves too much is easy to call mad, and a mad queen is easy to lock away. The roads of Castile had never seen such a sight. By torchlight in the dead of winter, a coffin draped in royal silk creaked through the mud. Behind it rode a queen, cloaked in black, her hair loose, her eyes fevered, and around her a ring of guards carrying lanterns that barely cut through the fog. The bells of every village tolled as she passed. Dogs howled. Peasants crossed themselves and whispered, "She travels with the dead." For 6 months, the cortege crawled across Spain, from Burgos to Tordesillas, from Tordesillas to Granada, never settling, never burying. Each stop became a ritual. At dusk, the queen ordered the coffin opened. The guards obeyed in silence. Inside, the body lay pale and waxen, crowned with wilted roses. Juana would kneel, her fingers tracing his cold cheek, her lips moving in whispers no one could hear. Sometimes she laughed softly, as if he had just told her a secret. Sometimes she wept until the candles burned down. Then she would command the lid be closed again, and they would move on. The journey became legend before it ended. People lined the roads just to glimpse her, the queen who defied the grave. Some said she was bewitched, others that she was holy. But those who looked into her face saw neither madness nor sanctity, only exhaustion, and something worse, clarity, because Juana was not lost. She knew what she was doing. She had seen how the crown treated love, as a tool, a bargain, a weapon, and she would not let it consume what little remained of hers. If the living had betrayed her, then she would keep faith with the dead. When night fell, her entourage made camp among the trees. The guards built fires, the priests prayed, and the queen, as always, sat beside the coffin. Once a monk asked her gently, "Majesty, do you not fear this is against God's will?" She looked at him, eyes hollow. "God took my husband," she said. "He can wait to take the rest." The air grew colder as they moved south. Frost clung to the horses' manes. The wheels froze in ruts of ice. Still, she refused to stop. In one village, when a convent bell rang the call for matins, she panicked, believing nuns were coming to steal her beloved away. She ordered the camp packed in darkness and forbade any woman from entering her presence. For weeks, no female voice was heard near her tent. The soldiers began to dream strange dreams, of coffins that breathed, of footsteps following their own. Even the mules shied when she approached. Her presence warped the air. It was as if grief itself had taken human form and demanded an escort. And yet, to those who had eyes to see, there was something majestic in her defiance. Kings rule nations. Juana ruled memory. When the cortege reached the monastery at Torquemada, the abbot begged her to rest, to bury the body before winter devoured them all. She agreed at last, but only for one night. The next dawn she woke to frost crusting the windows, whispered her prayers, and gave the same order. "Open it." The monks refused. She screamed until the bells shattered the morning quiet. They opened it, and as the pale light spilled across the corpse, Juana smiled, the soft, terrible smile of someone who no longer fears sin. Tordesillas was never meant to be a prison. It was a palace once, small, cold, lonely, built for queens to rest, not rot. But when Juana arrived, it became something else. They told her it was only temporary, that she needed peace, that her mind must be healed away from the court's noise. Yet when the gates closed behind her and the iron bar fell into place, she understood. Peace was just another word for silence. The coffin came with her, of course. They placed it in a small chapel next to her chambers. The air smelled of wax and mildew. The candles flickered like frightened eyes. And every evening, as the sun sank behind the river, Juana walked the short distance between her bed and his coffin. Always the same steps, always the same whisper, "Good night, my love. I am still here." At first her jailers kept count of how many times she visited him. Then they stopped. Because counting meant acknowledging that time still mattered, and in that place time had ceased to exist. Her mother, Isabella, sent priests to guide her soul. Her father, Ferdinand, sent guards to watch her body. Spain had two rulers again, and neither trusted the one who wore the crown. Juana was queen in name, but her pen was taken, her seal locked away, her children removed one by one. Her eldest son, Charles, would grow up to be emperor, but he would learn to rule without remembering the mother who made him. For 46 years, she remained in that fortress. Seasons blurred like melted wax. The river froze and thawed. The guards changed faces, and still she lingered beside the coffin. They said sometimes she sang old lullabies from Flanders, the ones Philip used to hum when he was drunk on wine and vanity. Sometimes she laughed, not with joy but with disbelief, as though she had discovered that love, when stripped of everything, still had bones that refused to die. Visitors who came from court left uneasy. They spoke of her calm, her clarity. The faint smile she gave when they told her she was free to pray. "Pray," she said once. "I have been praying for decades. It changes nothing." One confessor asked, "Majesty, do you forgive him now?" Juana looked at the floor. "Forgive?" she murmured. "Forgive a ghost?" Outside, Spain's empire was rising. Ships sailed for the New World. Silver poured into Seville. Her son conquered lands she would never see. But inside Tordesillas, the queen who had carried the dead still ruled one kingdom. The kingdom of memory. She kept Philip's coffin sealed now. She no longer needed to open it. The face, the scent, the sound of his voice, they were all inside her, fixed, preserved, eternal. Sometimes the guards heard her murmuring in her sleep. "Soon," she would say. "Soon we'll leave this place together." She began to fade like a candle burning to the end of its wick, the light trembling, the wax pooling around the base. Even her jailers pitied her. They had grown old under her gaze. They called her La Santa Loca, the holy madwoman. And they began to cross themselves when they passed her door, because in her silence they sensed something sacred. When she finally fell ill, no doctor was summoned. No priest dared enter without trembling. The coffin, her only companion, stood beside her bed like a shadow waiting to be reclaimed. Her last words were almost a sigh. "Philip," she whispered, "you were never mine to keep, but I kept you anyway." Outside, the bells tolled again, as they had when he died, as they would when she joined him, and for the first time in decades, the door to the chapel was opened. The coffin was carried out. Juana's bed was left empty. In that still room, a candle guttered, then went dark. History is cruel to women, and even crueler to their sons. When Juana's firstborn Charles was taken from her arms, he was not yet 2 years old. The courtiers promised she would see him soon, but soon in politics means never again. He grew up in foreign halls, tutored by priests who taught him that his mother's mind was broken, that she was not to be spoken of, that her name belonged in prayers, not in memories. He learned Latin before he learned the word mother. When he was crowned emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, they called him Charles V, the man who would rule half the known world, and far away in a cold cell in Tordesillas, the woman who had given him life was forgotten by name, but remembered by curse. Each time Charles signed a treaty or sent a fleet, his advisers whispered, "May he not inherit her madness." Every decision he made, every silence he held, was shaped by the fear of becoming her. Juana's other children fared no better. Isabella was married to the King of Denmark, a match made of strategy, not kindness. Ferdinand became a Habsburg too, a man raised to believe his blood was both holy and doomed. They carried their mother's name like a ghost tied to their lineage, invisible, but always there. Even as Spain rose to its golden age, the whispers never stopped. They said the empire was built on a woman's madness, on the price she paid for loving too hard. Once, when Charles visited Tordesillas as a grown man, he stood at her door but could not bring himself to enter. His counselors warned him, "She will not know you." He nodded, but the truth was more painful. He feared she would. From inside, she heard the commotion, the hooves, the armor, the trumpets. She asked a guard, "Who has come?" "For your majesty," said the guard. "It is the emperor, your son." She rose slowly, her bones aching, her hands trembling. "Then tell him," she said. "His mother still prays for him every night." But Charles never entered. He left an offering at the chapel door, kissed the cold marble, and rode away before dawn. Years later, when the empire began to fracture under its own weight, he confessed to a monk. "My mother was the only one who truly believed God saw her." The monk replied, "And yet the world saw her as mad." Charles looked up and said, "Perhaps that is why she was closer to God than any of us." In the silence of her prison, Juana never knew she had birthed an emperor. She never saw the galleons carrying Spain's glory across the ocean, never touched the gold from the new world that filled her son's treasury. The riches that built cathedrals and funded wars could not buy back the years she lost. When her name was spoken in court, it was as a footnote, a relic, a caution. The queen who loved too much, they said, and therefore lost her mind. But in the centuries that followed, when Spain's power dimmed and the empire's faith turned brittle, some began to wonder, was Juana mad? Or was she the only one sane enough to mourn the cost of loving in a world built for power? Long after Juana's death, her story refused to rest. It wandered Spain like a ghost, whispered in convents, sung in taverns, written in secret margins of royal chronicles. They called her La Reina del Ataúd, the coffin queen, the woman who slept beside death and would not let love decay. In the villages of Castile, they said that on moonless nights, you could still see her procession moving through the fields, a trail of dim lanterns and hooves echoing on frozen earth. Mothers warned their daughters, "Love no man as Juana loved Philip, or you will follow him into the grave." The church turned her into a lesson. The poets turned her into a prayer. And the crown, embarrassed by her defiance, locked her memory behind marble and silence. But stories have their own kind of rebellion. They find cracks in walls. They survive in whispers. They outlive kings. In the cathedrals of Toledo and Valladolid, monks argued whether she had been possessed or chosen. Some said the devil had taken her heart. Others said God had taken pity on her soul. A few, quietly, believed she had simply refused to lie. They said the night after she died, the guards at Tordesillas saw a light flicker in the chapel. It was not candlelight, they swore. It was pale, cold, trembling like breath. When they entered, the coffin of Philip the Handsome was open. No one could explain how. In Madrid, court historians rewrote her letters. They softened her words, cut out the rage, and made her sound meek, as queens are supposed to be. But the real Juana lived on in rumor, the queen who would not obey death. Painters loved her. They painted her by candlelight, standing over a coffin, her face half in shadow, half in prayer. Her eyes always searching for something the living could not see. And yet even in legend she was misunderstood. They called her mad because it was easier than admitting the truth, that grief can be holy, that love, when stripped of all its masks, is indistinguishable from worship. Generations later, when Spain began to crumble under its own weight, some said Juana had cursed it, that every empire born of conquest must one day taste the loneliness of its forgotten queen. The irony was not lost on the poets. The woman once called mad had become Spain's conscience. For centuries her ghost lingered at the edge of history, appearing in the lull between power and ruin. And each time a king buried a secret, or a queen lost her heart to ambition, they said the sound of a distant carriage echoed across the plains, and a woman's voice whispered from the dark, "Open it. I must see him again." And even now, when the bells of Tordesillas ring on stormy nights, locals swear the wind carries the sound of wheels, slow, rhythmic, endless, as if the queen's journey never truly ended. Because some loves are not meant to be buried. They simply learn how to haunt. The end came softly, the way snow falls on ruins. Quiet, unresisted, almost kind. Juana's body was buried in the royal monastery of Santa Clara, the same ground that had caged her for half a lifetime. Her coffin was simple, dark wood, modest gold trim, nothing like the gleaming sarcophagus that had carried her husband across Spain. Even in death, the court sought to contain her. No statues, no hymns, no parade, only silence, as if Spain feared her still. But those who carried her down the crypt stairs swore the air turned colder, as though her soul lingered to see where they would lay her. Some said a faint scent of roses, Philip's favorite, filled the chapel. Others said it was just the dust of years rising as her coffin passed. When the last priest left, a single candle remained burning beside her grave. It was small, weak, trembling, but it burned through the night. The years rolled on. Empires rose and fell. The Habsburg bloodline faded into portraits and relics. Her son Charles became legend. her grandson, myth. But Juana became something harder to name. When travelers came to Tordesillas generations later, they spoke of the silence there, not empty, but full of the kind of stillness that waits, that remembers. A nun once claimed she saw the queen kneeling beside the old chapel at dawn, her hands clasped, her hair loose, her face neither young nor old, but simply eternal. When the nun approached, the vision whispered, "Tell them I am not mad, tell them I am faithful." And then the light broke and she was gone. The priest dismissed it as dream. But dreams are how history apologizes to those it wronged. In time, Juana became a story told by candlelight, the woman who would not let go, who loved so fiercely that even heaven could not cure her. To some she was a warning, to others a prayer, but to Spain she was the quiet truth the crown could never erase, that even behind gold and power, a heart can break loud enough to echo for centuries. When the final door of her crypt was sealed, it was said that the wind rose suddenly, rattling the iron gates, snuffing every candle but one. That last flame bent low, as if bowing to her, and then went out. For the first time in 46 years, Juana slept without a coffin beside her. And in that stillness, the woman who had been queen, mother, prisoner, and ghost finally rested. Not in madness, not in grief, but in the rarest peace of all, the kind earned only by those who love too much and refuse to stop. Night settles over Castile like a shawl of ashes. The monastery sleeps, the bells are still, and the river moves without sound. Somewhere beneath that earth, the queen who once defied death finally rests beside the man who made her name immortal. No torches, no whispers, no rattling of wheels, only dust and memory. If you listen long enough, the silence begins to hum. It sounds like breath, faint, steady, as if the stone itself remembers her heartbeat. They called her mad, but what she truly was faithful. Too faithful for a world that mistakes endurance for insanity. Juana la Loca, the queen who would not bury love, who carried the weight of her own devotion through decades of darkness, became something larger than her sorrow. She became the proof that grief can be holy, that love once promised never dies. It only learns how to wait. So tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine her walking the roads of Castile once more. A lone figure in black, a lantern in her hand, a coffin that glows faintly beneath the moon, and as the wind drifts through the cypress trees, you might almost hear her voice, soft, worn, tender, a whisper meant not for the living, but for the dead she could never leave behind. Sleep now, my love. I am finally coming home.